These murders did not happen because there was going to be an apocalyptic race war. That's not why this happened. The victims weren't chosen at random.
Manson was not charged with murder right away, despite the evidence. His story was being told in the news. It was all about how Manson was in juvenile detention when he was 16 and had a wife and a kid by age 17. From age 17, Manson had been under surveillance by the FBI, though they didn't have a warrant. Manson dabbled in Scientology while going in and out of the prison system. He picked up the guitar and got decently good. He began having followers and grew out his hair. They were showcased as a band of hippies and a pseudo-religious cult whose members got along with no money. The Tate and LaBianca murder trial started in July 1970, and Manson was suspected to be having acid flashbacks during the 7 months of trial. He was making weird faces with an X carved into his forehead, and the freak show was massively covered by the media, which made it a huge stage onto which someone could push a certain narrative. One of Tom's biggest questions was how could the FBI have been unaware of Manson's murder plan, which he called Helter Skelter, if he'd been under surveillance since he was 17. Tom got an interview with Bugliosi at his house in Pasadena.
He invited me to his house in Pasadena, so it was April of 99. We spent literally 6 hours together. And towards the end of the 6 hours, I did realize that even though he was talking nonstop and I'm recording everything, he hadn't given me anything new or different. So I did what we call the Hail Mary pass in journalism, which is you ask someone if there's anything they could tell you off the record, not for attribution. So what he told me was that famously an audio or videotape was taken from the Tate house by the police first day after the murders. They found it hidden up in a loft. Home videotaping was relatively new at that point. Not a lot of people had cameras, but Roman Polanski did. And in Helter Skelter, Vince says in the book that the police took the tape, viewed it, and it was just Sharon and Roman making love. Vince told me originally off the record that the tape wasn't of Roman and Sharon making love. It was Sharon being forced to have sex with two men against her wishes, and he said Roman was the one who was making it because you could hear him in the background.
After his conversation with Bugliosi, Tom felt like the official narrative was too superficial. The story of drug-addicted killers going into the suburbs and killing people while on MDA was much more nuanced.
Once I had that, that's kind of the first rabbit hole I went down, because I'm like, well, if this was different in the official narrative, what else might they have changed?
One of Tom's most valuable interviewees was Billy Doyle, who had been a frequent visitor at the Tate home. He told Tom that generations of reporters had lost their jobs investigating Manson's case. Doyle advised Tom to tread lightly, but offered him a lead into who was supplying MDA for both Polanski and the Spahn Ranch, a 55-acre movie ranch in LA where Manson had been living. 21 detectives were put on the Tate murder, but couldn't figure out anything over the course of 4 months. On the other hand, Tom was able to find the MDMA dealer in Vegas, and the dealer clued him into music executive Terry Melcher. Melcher had once promised Manson record deals. Manson would torment Melcher by throwing eggs at his house and teasing him with naked girls in his van, demanding the music deal he'd been promised. Melcher told Tom that he'd only met with Manson a total of 3 times, the last 2 times being before the murders. Melcher was close with Dennis Wilson, the drummer of the Beach Boys. Melcher had linked up Manson and Wilson. Wilson's mansion in Pacific Palisades had 31 rooms, filled with girls who would provide the men with sex on command. And Manson helped Wilson co-write Ceased to Exist for the Beach Boys. Manson's name grew bigger. Greg Jacobson, another musician, joined Manson and Wilson at the house. Rudy Altobelli owned the house on Cielo Drive. He was the first to tell the police that Manson should be a suspect. Manson, Melcher, and Jacobson had previously rented the house under the name Golden Penetrators.
I got a call from one of my sources, Rudy Altobelli, who was another important witness. He was the man who owned the house where the murders happened. He was traveling actually in Europe with Sharon, who had come back Sharon taped about 3 weeks before to have her baby. And Rudy had told me from the very beginning, he was very close to Terry, Dennis Wilson, and the third guy, Greg Jacobson. Greg Jacobson was another important witness who lied throughout all of his testimony in the trial to fit a narrative that Vince needed.
Desperate for more information, Tom paid off a guy on MansonFamilyMurders.com for redacted investigative reports. The reports were alluding to information within the FBI about the Tate and LaBianca murders being premeditated. This made the official report by the police chief, which had said that these murders had nothing to do with each other, seemed less reliable. Another question on Tom's mind was, if Manson was the mastermind, why would he choose a killing virgin like Susan Atkins and some kid from Texas to perform one of the biggest murders of the century? At almost 5 years of investigating, Tom got close with a lawyer who worked on the case in the DA's office. He told Tom off the record that Melcher was a liar. Melcher was at the Spahn Ranch after the murder, although he claimed to never have seen Manson again. The lawyer said that most of the evidence on the case had been destroyed. However, he let Tom into an evidence locker anyway, where he found a long legal pad that was Bugliosi's when he was interviewing one of the key witnesses. In that pad was the name of Danny DiCarlo, a biker that frequented Spahn Ranch and was probably trafficking drugs through Manson's girls. DiCarlo told Bugliosi that Melcher went to the ranch after the murder again. Melcher was not only at the ranch and had lied about it, but he was actually taking acid with Manson at the time. The FBI had pictures of him on his knees as he and Manson were dancing in the meadow. The picture was not incriminating, but the fact that Melcher lied during one of the biggest court cases ever was. However, Melcher died prematurely at age 62 when Tom was investigating him. He was also getting into a side investigation on Gary Hinman. Hinman was allegedly involved with the Black Panthers and was getting famous. He was tortured and murdered in July 1969, and the words "political piggy" were written in blood on the walls. This mirrored Tate's murder, where the word pig was written on the wall with her blood.
Everyone believed that Charlie had killed the Black Panther, according to what he had told everyone. There was an intent to try to throw the investigators off the trail.
Sheriff's Homicide was handling the Hinman murders, and two of the homicide investigators went to the Tate investigators and said, look, we have this murder of Gary Hinman, and there's writing in blood on the wall, in Hinman's blood. So they said, we think these are connected. The LAPD investigators sent them away, said, no, they're not connected.
On August 16, 1969, there was a full raid on the Spahn Ranch because it was suspected that Manson was running an auto theft gang that stole Volkswagens and converted them into dune buggies. Detectives said the raid had nothing to do with the murders. The DA's lawyer gave Tom the phone number of one of the most reliable cops, Charlie Gunther. Gunther refused to speak over the phone, insisting they were being bugged. Instead, he met with Tom out in Victorville. There, Gunther discussed the autopsies of the Tate, Hinman, and LaBianca murders. He said the Hinman murder had been connected to Bobby Beausoleil, a member of the family who was charged with Hinman's murder, and back to Manson. But no one was willing to listen. Tom began feeling like the raid was a cover-up. Also, during those 4 months, Manson was not detained despite having been a suspect. He was in Big Sur and got arrested for grand theft auto, only to be set free despite his criminal record. Manson seemed to have a get-out-of-jail-free card. Bugliosi had said that Manson was living at the ranch all the way through September, which was false considering his arrest record in Big Sur. Tom got in touch with Louis Watnick, another retired DA.
So when I got this record, a pretty substantial record, I took it to someone named Louis Watnick, who was a retired judge and a retired district attorney, and he's looking at all the documents, and he's seeing this pattern of catch, release, and he's going, chicken shit, this is all chicken shit. He goes, he should have gone back the first time. He goes, they wanted him out. He said he was more important to somebody out than in. He goes, you've got to find out who it was. And I go, well, how do I do that? And he goes, you're not going to be able to.
Lewis thought Manson was the conduit for the FBI to the black markets and was involved with the hippies and the MDA dealer. To control him meant to control all sides. Sebring, Tate, and Polanski were all close friends of Reeve Whitson, a CIA agent in the clothes of a hippie.
He told, before he died, and a couple years before his death, 3 or 4 of his closest friends, including his attorney, that he had worked on an operation, and he wouldn't tell them who, but he had infiltrated the Manson family prior to the murders, and it was his dying regret was he could have prevented them but didn't. He also said that he was at the crime scene after the killers had left, but before the police had arrived, which was like a 4 or 5 hour window.
He also probably knew of the murders because he had Tate's house under surveillance. A ghostwriter contributed to Helter Skelter, and it was rumored to be CIA, potentially Reeve. Shirok Hatami, Sharon Tate's personal photographer, told O'Neill he was forced into cooperating with Bugliosi during the inquiry by Reeve. If Hatami would not cooperate, Reeve threatened to deport him back to Iran. In 1967, Manson had acquired a house in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco at 558 Clayton Street, with his parole officer Roger Smith as a co-signer. David Elvin Smith was a postdoctoral student at UC San Francisco and the chief of the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Screening Unit at San Francisco General Hospital. He did studies injecting rats with LSD, subsequently opening the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic at 558 Clinton Street in June 1967. Soon enough, the clinic began seeing a lot of the Manson family. David Smith knew that Manson would use a combination of LSD and mind games to manipulate the girls into complete obedience and devotion, treating them like objects and wearing away their independence. Subsequently, the family quickly moved on to taking speed, which often made them violent. David Smith told Tom that the helter-skelter plan might have been a paranoid speed delusion. Any indication of the family's usage of speed was kept out of the trial by Bugliosi. David Smith believed he knew why. It put the prosecution's case in jeopardy of showing mitigating circumstances. Roger Smith joined the clinic for his own amphetamine research project, ARP, using human subjects. This meant that both Smiths and Manson were frequently in the same area at the same time, thanks to financing from a government institute that was subsequently proven to be a CIA front. Roger was well aware that Manson was a psychopath, yet he took no action. Instead, he watched Manson fry his brain on acid every day, gathering followers. Dr. Jolly West at the Haight-Ashbury Clinic was doing his own LSD studies long before he got to California. West had co-authored some studies with David Smith, even though they never met in person. West's LSD research had more obvious and sinister links to the CIA than the others. He had conducted behavior control studies on Americans without their knowledge or consent, using medications and hypnosis. The claim had made the front page of the New York Times in 1977, but West denied it until his death, and no one had ever confirmed it. The CIA also tested drugs on American citizens, most of whom were held in federal prisons or military facilities and were unaware of the procedures they were subjected to. West had been heavily involved in these operations, lying about it and covering his tracks. Tom informed David Smith about the CIA's study and how it paralleled Manson's brainwashing behavior with the girls. The agency wanted to do exactly what Manson had done. He wondered if Manson had been influenced by the CIA while he was in San Francisco. David said that the experiments on the military were proof that people can be brainwashed with LSD, although the CIA maintained the opposite. West also went to Oklahoma City's Lincoln Park Zoo on August 2, 1962, where he gathered excited observers to see his newest test. He obtained an Asian elephant named Tusko, an unusual specimen in Oklahoma. West injected the elephant with 2,800 milligrams of acid, about 1,400 times the amount needed to cause mental instability in a human. The dose was miscalculated, however, and Tusko collapsed, experiencing a respiratory seizure that resulted in death. Tom had found Jolly West's MKultra letters and was hoping for answers about how Manson persuaded his followers to kill. He hoped to learn that West and Manson had met, and that Manson's success in founding the family owed something to the CIA's mind control tactics. In the letters, West laid out his intentions for utilizing LSD to establish a cult of personality around himself, which he addressed to a CIA handler. He also talked about his preparations for the impending Manson trial. Manson walked the same streets and went to the same clinic as West. Thus, Tom was convinced that Manson had utilized LSD, and he still needed to address why the police had left Manson on the loose even after the murders, which allowed him to commit more crimes even if they were never linked to him by them. A ranch hand testified at the trial that Manson boasted of killing 35 people. The remains had been buried or arranged to appear as if they had committed suicide, but fact that the family had never been charged with these murders did not negate the fact that they had occurred. It appeared that everything was pointing in the same direction. Manson had to be an informant, according to Watnick. In addition, West had written to his CIA masters, informing them that he had implanted a fake memory in someone, a piece of information left out from a report provided to Congress by the CIA. Tom hated being asked about what really happened, because he did not know. Tom's goal wasn't to say what did happen, it was to prove that the official story did not. The murders may have been the result of drug overuse, Alternatively, the family might have been caught up in the chaos and COINTELPRO operations, where they were provoked into violence while sheriff's officers and the LAPD looked the other way, forcing a cover-up.